The Galactic Council chamber was carved from the bones of a star. Every wall was a pane of living crystal, light pulsing through it like veins of molten fire. To most of the galaxy, this place was sacred. To humans, it was simply another cage. The councillors sat in their crescent dais, their elongated forms draped in silks, feathers, or armor depending on their species. They were the arbiters of order. They were the final word. They had forgotten the one truth of the void. Order only held until something stronger broke it. And the humans were breaking it. The chamber buzzed with whispers as the holographic display of Sol's sphere lit up at the center of the room. Not the Earth. Earth had long since been sealed by quarantine cordons after the planetary resource wars. Not Mars either, whose dust cities clung stubbornly to life. No, the projection flared wider, showing the outer colonies, the dust worlds, the acid oceans, the frozen hellscapes no council-aligned species had ever dared to claim. They were hostile. They were lethal. They were uninhabitable. And yet, humans lived there, thrived there, multiplied there. Councillor Vaith, a membraned cephid with skin like a stretched drum, slammed one limb against the crystal table. This is madness. These apes infest worlds no life should touch. Their colonies spread across what should be sterilized zones. Every time we look away, another scarred rock becomes a nest. From the far side of the crescent, a more measured voice replied. Councillor Thryan of the Deloth, her four eyes shimmering like prisms, lifted a hand. You exaggerate. They are few. Fragile. Humans are opportunistic vermin, yes, but vermin burn out quickly. Leave them to their deathworlds, and the planets will kill them for us. A ripple of dry laughter scattered across the dais, but Vaith's tone sharpened. You are blind. They have lived their generations. They have adapted. They are building fortresses out of toxins and storms. They are forging weapons from climates that annihilate us. If we allow this, they will not be fragile. They will be something else. Silence stretched. Every councillor remembered the reports, whispers of humans with eyes adapted to radioactive glow, lungs that drank acid air, bones denser than council alloys. Rumours, of course, but rumours had toppled empires. Finally, the presiding voice spoke, a construct of light woven from the agreement of all species present. Its voice was not male or female, but the flat weight of decree. Then it is decided. Humanity's Deathworld colonies will be chained. Yet we will dispatch an envoy to enforce submission. If they do not yield, they will be purged. The Age of Scars ends before it begins. The dust world of Cauldron 4 was not a world anyone sane would claim. Its surface was a shifting wasteland of crimson dust, whipped by storms that stripped paint from metal and skin from bone. Temperatures swung from searing furnace days to sub-zero nights. The air was toxic, laced with silicates that shredded lungs. The council had marked it uninhabitable centuries ago. And yet a human city rose from its poisoned canyons. Domes made of fused sand glimmered faintly in the twilight. Walkways cut through jagged cliffs, reinforced with scavenged alloys. Farms glowed with fungal light beneath the surface, producing food in caverns filled with carefully engineered atmosphere. Children with dust-scarred cheeks ran laughing through corridors where other species would choke. On Cauldron 4, survival was not theoretical, it was inherited. The council delegation arrived in a gleaming vessel, its surface humming with sterilizers to keep the dust at bay. It descended like a predator into the canyon, settling on the landing platform carved into rock. Out stepped their envoy, a tall, narrow Celt, robes trailing behind like smoke. Behind him, armored troopers fanned out, their rifles gleaming. Waiting for them was Governor Mara Kestrel. She was not what the envoy expected. Not a warlord, not a ragged survivor. She wore no armor, no ragged furs. She was simply human, middle-aged, skin weathered by dust and sun, eyes like shards of obsidian. Scars traced her arms in pale latticework, each line a history untold. She stood with hands behind her back, the dust storms howling around her as though they dared not touch her. The envoy inclined his head. Governor Kestrel, by decree of the Galactic Council, Cauldron 4 is henceforth under council stewardship. Your colony must submit to inspection, taxation, and population control. Resistance will not be tolerated. Mara tilted her head slightly as though she hadn't heard. Behind her, the wind roared louder, grains of razor dust slashing the air. A few particles struck the envoy's sterilizer field and hissed out of existence. Finally, she spoke, her voice low, almost amused. Do you feel it? The envoy blinked. Feel what? The storm. The dust. The planet itself. It hates you. It hates everything that doesn't belong. You can stand here only because your little machine pretends to hold it back. But us? She spread her arms wide, letting the red dust slash across her face. We don't fight it. We let it carve us. We let it scar us until we are part of it. One of the armoured troopers shifted uneasily. The envoy sneered. Poetic nonsense. You are squatters in a graveyard. Mara's smile didn't reach her eyes. You mistake scars for weakness. But scars are proof that we were hurt and survived. Do you know what happens when you chain something covered in scars, Councillor? She leaned in close enough that the sterilizer field shimmered. It doesn't break, it cuts back. The meeting ended in silence. The envoy departed with threats. But the Council's troopers left behind more than words. They left surveillance, transmitters, eyes in the dust. Within days, the Council issued a formal ultimatum, submission or eradication. Cauldron 4's answer came not in words, but in blood. The first strike hit during a dust storm when visibility was zero. Council dropships descended, armoured soldiers fanning through the canyons, confident their sterilizer fields would shield them. They marched toward the domes, rifles ready. The planet howled. Then the humans emerged, not soldiers, colonists, miners with reinforced exosuits, farmers wielding blades made of fused obsidian, children clutching devices that hummed with jury-rigged plasma charges. Their faces were scarred, their lungs rasped, but their eyes burned. The first trooper fired. His plasma bolt tore through a miner's chest. The man staggered, blood sizzling on his suit, but he did not fall. He surged forward, swung his tool, and caved the trooper's helmet in one brutal strike. Sparks sprayed into the storm. The Council forces faltered. These were not the frail vermin they had imagined. These were people who treated pain as casual, who used scars as armour. Every injury was ignored, every wound simply another mark on a body already carved by dust. The storm itself seemed to fight for them. Sand clogged the sterilizer fields, chewing through circuits, armour joints seized, breath filters clogged. Meanwhile, the humans moved like they could see through the maelstrom. They knew the winds, they knew the blind spots. They were the storm's children. Hours later, when the storm cleared, the Council's strike force was gone. Only torn banners and shattered rifles remained, half buried in crimson sand. The domes still stood, glowing defiantly. Governor Mara Kestrel stood on the canyon rim, the dust lashing her hair into a black halo. Her voice carried across the comms channel as she transmitted a message, not just to the Council, but to every colony listening, human or otherwise. You wanted to chain us, you tried, but you do not understand. We are not fragile, we are not vermin. We are the scars this galaxy tried to give us, and we are done being silent. Come again if you like, bring your fleets, bring your laws, bring your chains. We will still be here, bleeding and laughing when you are dust. In the Council chamber, the recording played on a loop. Silence gripped the dice. For the first time in centuries, the Council felt something they had forgotten. Fear. The Council's pride could not tolerate silence. Cauldron 4's defiance was an open wound across their authority, a scar they could not ignore. To yield was unthinkable. To retaliate was inevitable. And so the decree went out, Operation Purity. 3 fleets converged on the Dustworld, ships bristling with weapons designed for extermination. Their doctrine was simple. Humans were vermin, and vermin could be sterilized. The warships broke orbit in unison, their hulls gleaming like silver knives. Within their holds, bioengineered soldiers awaited deployment. They were bred in council labs, engineered for speed, strength, and unquestioning obedience. They had never lost a campaign. The Council believed the battle would last hours. They were wrong. Governor Mara Kestrel stood within the command dome of Cauldron 4, her eyes fixed on the void. The scarred surface of the planet stretched beneath her like a battlefield already drenched in blood. Around her, advisors muttered about fleet trajectories, weapon readouts, energy reserves. But Mara listened not to them. She listened to the silence of the colonists gathered below, to the steady rhythm of lungs inhaling dust, to the faint laughter of children who had never feared the storm. That was the sound that mattered. She opened the comms. Her voice was calm, steady. They are coming. They think this is the end, but we know the truth. We have lived with endings our whole lives. Let them come, let them bleed. Today the scars will speak for us. The first strike fell as a cleansing fire. Orbital cannons unleashed white lances of plasma, hammering into the domes. Shields buckled. Sand fused into molten glass. The canyon walls roared as shockwaves tore through them. From orbit it looked decisive. From orbit it looked final. But in the canyons, the humans did not scatter. They endured. They moved underground, into tunnels carved by generations of desperate hands. They sealed doors of fused obsidian and steel. They waited. The Council's soldiers landed in waves, sterilizer fields humming, rifles raised. Their commanders sneered at the silence. Too easy, they thought. The vermin had fled. Then the storm rose. Crimson dust boiled across the battlefield, blotting out the sun. The sterilizer fields whined as silicates hammered their barriers. Soldiers switched to thermal sensors. They saw nothing. Then the screaming began. Humans emerged from the storm like shadows, their bodies cloaked in ragged exosuits patched with scars of battle and weather. But it was not the armor that terrified the Council soldiers. It was the people inside. A trooper fired into a miner's chest. The plasma bolt tore through flesh, but the man did not fall. He staggered, blood sizzling on his armor, then drove his blade into the soldier's gut. His eyes burned with something the engineered soldier could not understand. Acceptance. Pain was not the end. Pain was the beginning. The Council had never seen fighters who refused to stop when wounded. On Cauldron 4, wounds were as common as breath. One soldier ripped off his own burned gauntlet, hand charred to bone, and used the jagged edges as a weapon. Another staggered with a hole through her lung, blood bubbling with every word, yet she kept screaming orders to her squad until her last breath. Even the children fought, darting through the storm with small plasma charges, detonating at the soldiers' feet before vanishing back into the dust. The Council's troops were bred for perfection, efficiency, victory. But perfection shattered when faced with something that refused to die. The battle escalated. The Council deployed their bioweapons, clouds of engineered pathogens designed to liquefy human organs within minutes. The clouds rolled through the canyons, invisible death sweeping forward. The soldiers smiled behind their helmets. This would end it. But the humans did not fall. Their lungs had long adapted to dust laced with toxins. Their immune systems were forged by generations of plague and famine. The pathogens struck, but instead of killing, they were consumed. Their codes rewritten, dismantled, made fuel. The children coughed blood and kept running. The miners wiped bile from their mouths and kept fighting. When reports filtered back to the Council ships, the plague isn't working. Silence chilled every commander. Then came the next horror. The humans harvested the plague. They gathered samples in glass tubes, whispering thanks to the storm, and released them back against the invaders. Only this time, the pathogen carried human code. Rewritten, twisted, designed to feast on sterilizer fields. Council soldiers began choking inside their armor as their own protection turned against them. Governor Mara stood on the canyon rim, watching as red clouds and fire danced below. Her comms buzzed with frantic updates. They're retreating in Sector 5. Pathogen adapted, spreading through their lines. Our wounded are still fighting. She gave only one reply. Hold. Make them listen. The storm howled. Through its veil, Mara saw one of the Council's champions, a bioengineered colossus bred for war. 8 feet tall, skin-plated with carbon armor, eyes glowing like molten steel. It roared as it tore through human lines, ripping men in half, smashing walls with its fists. Mara descended into the fray. The colossus turned as she approached, towering over her. Its voice was a guttural snarl. Fragile ape, you will kneel. She met its gaze. Her face was calm, her scars gleaming in the stormlight. You think scars are weakness. She unstrapped her gauntlet, revealing her bare arm, skin crisscrossed with white lines. But scars are memory. Everyone means we faced death and lived. The colossus lunged. Mara dodged, the dust storm cloaking her. She moved like the storm itself, striking and vanishing, each blow cutting deeper. The colossus bellowed, slamming fists into the canyon floor. Finally, Mara leapt onto its back, driving a shard of fused obsidian into its neck. The beast howled, flailing, but she clung like a shadow. With a scream, she drove the shard deeper until the glow in its eyes flickered and died. The storm swallowed its corpse. The Council soldiers saw their champion fall. For the first time, they felt doubt. and in that doubt the humans pressed harder. By nightfall, the Council's troops were broken. Entire squads lay dead, their sterilizer fields corroded, their weapons fused. Survivors staggered back to their dropships, coughing blood, their perfect forms scarred. The humans did not pursue. They stood in the dust, silent, watching. The message was clear. This is our world. You cannot chain it. From orbit, the Council commanders stared in disbelief at their casualty reports. 70% losses. Pathogen ineffective. Morale collapse. They had unleashed everything short of orbital annihilation, and failed. The fleet commander, a cold-blooded Thrian, hissed. Retreat is impossible. To admit defeat is unthinkable. His gaze fell on the planet below. Then we burn it. We burn them all. But as he gave the order, the communications array lit up. A transmission was forcing its way through their encryption. The voice that filled their ships was calm, steady, scarred. This is Governor Mara Kestrel of Cauldron 4. You sent soldiers. You sent plagues. You sent champions. They are all dust now. You thought scars meant we were broken. You thought wounds would make us weak. But every scar is a reminder. Every wound is a lesson. We do not break. We do not kneel. We endure. And when the dust clears, it is you who will remember us. Silence gripped the fleet. On every ship, soldiers and officers felt the weight of her words. Scars were not weakness. Scars were proof. Proof that the humans had already suffered everything the galaxy could imagine and survived. The Council fleet withdrew, not in triumph, but in silence. Their banners hung heavy in the void, no longer symbols of order, but of fear. Cauldron 4 still stood, bloodied, scarred, unbroken, and across the galaxy other human colonies heard Mara's words. On ice worlds where storms never ceased, on jungle worlds where every tree dripped poison, on volcanic hellscapes where rivers of fire flowed, humans lifted their heads. The scars had spoken. The galaxy would never be the same. The blockade was supposed to choke them. For 2 cycles, the Council fleet lingered above Ironhold, its formation glimmering like a net of silver knives in orbit. Transports were interdicted, trade lanes cut, and drone satellites beamed down constant messages of surrender. The alien newscasts called it containment. The Council's admirals called it pacification. The people on the ground called it hunger. The dust storms swept across the canyons in endless ochre waves, coating every vent, every visor, every mouth. Crops failed, ration lines stretched around scorched plazas, and still the governor's voice came steady and unbroken from the cracked loudspeakers. We endure. The blockade had been designed for softer species, for worlds whose populations quailed when markets froze and warehouses emptied. But humans had been tempered on fire and ruin since the first step from their homeworld. On Ironhold, starvation was not a surrender bell. It was a memory. Old men remembered when the mines had collapsed and left entire districts buried in dust for months before rescue. They had chewed rats then. They would chew rats again. Young mothers remembered pregnancies carried under poisoned skies, lungs filling with grit, children clawing their way into life anyway. They would carry again. The Council thought deprivation would bend the scars. Instead, it woke them. Captain Threx of the blockade fleet was the first to notice that the planet below wasn't breaking. It was staring back. His sensors kept catching unauthorized pings. Not full transmissions, not enough to triangulate, but whispers. Human tech jury-rigged from mining lasers, weather stations, even children's toys turned into broad-spectrum beacons. Every time the Council jammed one, 3 more flared. They're speaking in noise, his communications officer muttered. Background static, distorted harmonics. I can't filter them out without cutting our own long range. Then cut it, Threx ordered. They're only ants gnashing their mandibles. But when he looked at the console, the pattern of noise resolved into something primal and chilling. A rhythm, a pulse. We are still here. On the surface, Governor Hale moved through the hunger camps like a man carved from iron. His coat was torn, his face lined, but his eyes never wavered. Governor, the Council patrols are targeting the smuggling tunnels again, one of his aides whispered. We lost 12 runners yesterday. Then you'll run 13 today, Hale answered. And you'll run them faster. Let the Council believe it bleeds us. Every runner they kill, 10 more step forward. He paused, looking over the ragged line of workers ladling broth into cracked bowls. Children clutched tin cups with shaking hands, eyes hollow but still burning. They thought we would bow, Hale said softly. They thought our scars were weaknesses. Show them scars are teeth. The first strike came not from orbit, but from the underworld. In the old mines, tunnels stretched for kilometers beneath Ironhold's crust, tunnels long abandoned, filled with unstable gas pockets and crumbling shafts. The Council had dismissed them as relics of primitive industry. The humans remembered them as arteries. When the blockade fleet's supply drones descended on pre-plotted paths, the tunnels erupted. Bolts of jury-rigged railguns, fired from scavenged metal coils and chemical propellants, ripped upward from hidden shafts. Several drones exploded in sheets of plasma before they ever reached the surface. The blockade adjusted instantly, deploying escorts, altering descent vectors, laying suppressive fire into canyon mouths. But they were shooting at ghosts. The humans had vanished back into the dust, leaving only echoes in the tunnels. Threx's fleet reported minor harassment. The Council broadcasts insisted nothing had changed. But for the people below, it was the first cut, the first proof that scars could bleed the giants above. The second strike was bolder. A Council patrol cruiser, sleek and bristling with weapons, was lured into low orbit by a false emergency beacon, refugees begging to be extracted from starvation. Against regulations, the captain dipped close enough to deploy shuttles. The canyon floor beneath him erupted. Dozens of plasma lances, fired not from military-grade batteries but from welded-together mining torches, speared upward in a coordinated volley. They weren't strong enough to pierce full military shielding, but they didn't need to. The humans had targeted the maneuvering thrusters. The patrol cruiser staggered, engines flaring unevenly. It drifted sideways, shields sparking as they overloaded to compensate. And then, with a groan that echoed across the desert sky, it clipped the canyon wall and tore itself open. The wreck burned for 3 days, a pyre visible even from orbit. The Council denounced it as sabotage. Governor Hale said nothing at all. His people needed no words. The scar of fire across the horizon told its own story. Now fear began to seep into the blockade. Threx demanded reinforcements, but the Council hesitated. Deploying more ships would acknowledge that the ants were dangerous. Worse, it would embolden other fringe colonies watching from afar. So the fleet held position, and the whispers grew louder. Every channel hummed with interference now, scraps of half-phrases, coded pulses, songs distorted through static. Some officers reported hearing voices in the white noise at night, human laughter, human chants, human promises of vengeance. Engineers tore apart consoles searching for faults. They found none. The humans weren't just sending messages. They were seeding belief, a belief that the scars could not be broken. Hale's inner circle gathered one night around a dim fire in the tunnels. Dust shifted overhead as the blockade's bombardments rattled the earth, but the governor's voice carried steady. "They will keep pressing until they believe us ash," he said, "and still we endure. But endurance is not enough. To break chains, we must strike the hand that holds them." A scarred veteran leaned forward. "You mean the fleet?" "I mean their pride," Hale said. "They rule by fear, by spectacle. Then we will show them a spectacle they cannot hide." Silence fell. The plan he outlined was madness, impossible. It demanded sacrifices no sane people would offer. But Ironhold was not sane. It was scarred, and scars had already paid the price. Weeks later, the fleet above detected an energy surge on the surface, far stronger than any previous strike. Threx moved to investigate, dispatching reconnaissance drones over the desert. They caught only fragments before static consumed the feeds, humans hauling massive generators into position, welding scavenged plating into colossal coils, chanting as they bled into circuits to complete them. Then silence. When the surge came again, it was not from the surface. It was from the sky. A pulse cannon, built from cannibalized mining lasers, fueled by Ironhold's last stockpiles of fissile ore, fired from a hidden launch bay beneath the canyons. The beam speared upward, punching through the void. And for the first time in recorded history, a Council battleship screamed. Its shields collapsed in a ripple of shattered light. Its hull buckled, fire blossoming along its spine. The ship staggered, engines tearing free in molten trails. Thousands of crews screamed into the void before the wreck split in half and rained debris across the blockade formation. The humans cheered in the tunnels until their throats bled. Governor Hale did not cheer. He only whispered, "Now they will come with fire." And they did. The Council's pride had been torn. Entire fleets mobilized now, racing toward Ironhold with orders to burn the colony to bedrock. But the Scars had already chosen their path. They were no longer fighting for survival. They were fighting to teach the galaxy a lesson, that hunger does not break scars, that fire does not break scars, that chains do not bind scars. Only death. And death for humans was never the end. The fleets came in waves. Dozens of Council task forces, banners of a dozen species flying from their hulls, each determined to erase Ironhold's defiance before it spread. Their war engines blotted out the stars, dreadnoughts, carriers, entire siege lines of frigates armed with planet killers. The Council had abandoned the language of diplomacy. This was extermination. Governor Hale stood in the canyon mouth as the dust storms raged, watching the sky ignite with their arrival. His aides begged him to retreat into the tunnels. He did not move. "They want us ash," he said, voice steady against the howling wind. "Then we will show them what ash becomes when it remembers fire." The first bombardment shook Ironhold to its core. Orbital cannons hammered the surface, turning mesas into slag, boiling rivers into vapor, smashing settlements into smoking craters. Entire districts vanished beneath walls of fire. But from the flames, the humans rose. They emerged blackened and coughing, dragging wounded from rubble, welding armor from wreckage, planting railguns on broken towers. Every strike that destroyed a block became a fortress. Every crumbled mine shaft became an ambush. The Council admirals watched in disbelief as their pacification only multiplied resistance. The humans weren't clinging to survival. They were thriving in destruction, shaping it like clay. "What are they?" one commander whispered as his fleet pounded the Deathworld for the third straight day. "How do they keep standing?" On the fourth day, the Scars struck back. From beneath the burning canyons, they launched swarms of scavenged drones, mining bots refitted with explosives, jury-rigged wings, and shards of reflective alloy that scattered sensor locks. They darted into orbit in chaotic clouds, overwhelming point defense, slamming into hulls like a rain of knives. Council cruisers staggered under the onslaught. One carrier lost half its flight deck to a swarm that burrowed inside and detonated from within. The admirals ordered full countermeasures. But when the humans lost drones, they launched more. When they lost more, they built more, scavenging wreckage in real time. War was supposed to drain a world. Ironhold drank it like water. Hale convened his council of survivors in the tunnels. The air reeked of blood and ozone, walls trembling with distant bombardments. "They will not stop until we are cinders," one scarred veteran rasped. "We have no fleets, no allies, just tunnels and bones." "Then tunnels and bones will be enough," Hale said. He spread a crude map across the table, traced with soot. "We have shown them pain. Now we show them memory. Every ship they lose here will not only bleed their fleets, it will scar their pride. And scars are forever." The room fell silent, not because they doubted, but because they understood. This was no longer about Ironhold. It was about the lesson their deaths would carve into the galaxy. The final plan was born in madness. The mining tunnels stretched deep, far deeper than the Council's scans had realized. At their lowest point lay pockets of unstable ore and volatile gas, long abandoned because they could never be safely extracted. Hale proposed turning them into a bomb. "We collapse the planet beneath them," he said. "We drag their fleets down in the fire of our own grave." The silence that followed was not horror. It was grim assent. As the Council tightened its orbital noose, the Scars worked night and day. Generators hummed, charges were set, veins of ore primed to ignite. Volunteers signed their names on scraps of paper, a record of those who would remain behind to trigger the cataclysm manually. When the list reached Hale, he added his own name without hesitation. "Governor," an aide whispered. "If you die, who will carry the story?" Hale met her eyes. "The story is not carried by men. It is carried by Scars." The fleets moved in for the killing blow on the 10th day. Dozens of dreadnoughts descended into low orbit, preparing to unleash planetary killer warheads. Dust storms churned, lightning danced, and the sky became a wall of flame. That was when Ironhold's surface split apart. Canyons erupted in pillars of fire as the charges ignited. Shockwaves ripped through the crust, turning entire plateaus into upward-spewing volcanoes. The ground trembled as the deep ore veins caught, and then the planet screamed. A chain reaction tore through Ironhold's mantle, blasting molten rock and plasma into orbit. Council fleets reeled as shockwaves ripped them apart, ships colliding, shields failing, dreadnoughts shattered in blossoms of fire. Carriers broke in half as magma geysers lashed at their hulls. The death of a world had become a weapon. And in its death, Ironhold reached up and dragged the Council down with it. From the safety of distant systems, trillions watched in horror. Council media had broadcast the campaign live, expecting a swift triumph. Instead, they saw fleets burn, admirals beg, and a Deathworld consume its enemies in an apocalypse of scars. The last transmission from Governor Hale was carried in static across every channel, his face soot-streaked and unflinching, staring into the void. "You thought our scars made us weak," he said, "but scars are memory. Scars are strength. Scars teach. Remember what we have taught you." Then the transmission dissolved into fire. When the dust settled, Ironhold was gone, reduced to a drifting field of molten rock and shattered steel. But the Council fleets were gone too, tens of thousands of ships annihilated in the cataclysm. The galaxy trembled. No longer was humanity a frontier nuisance, a collection of scattered colonies on hostile worlds. They had become a myth. The species that had turned its own extinction into a weapon. The scars that had chosen to teach. Across fringe colonies, uprisings flared. Slave worlds revolted. Vassal states whispered of resistance. The Council's grip cracked as fear spread like wildfire, and every whisper carried the same phrase, etched into the memory of the galaxy: "Scars do not bow." Years later, the survivors scattered across the stars, refugees who had fled before Ironhold's end, wanderers carrying fragments of their homeworld in lockets, tattoos, scars. They spoke softly in the marketplaces of alien stations, in the shadows of conquered worlds. And wherever they spoke, empires trembled. Because the galaxy had learned. The Council had tried to chain humanity's deathworlds, and the scars had fought back. The ruins of Ironhold drifted in silence. What had once been a dust world, scarred by storms and hunger, was now an asteroid belt of molten rock, slowly cooling in the void. Fragments of Council dreadnoughts floated among the debris, twisted metal entwined with scorched stone. No voice spoke there. No signal remained, only the cold testament of annihilation. Yet across the galaxy, the silence of Ironhold roared louder than any fleet. In the Council chambers, silence reigned where arrogance had once held sway. The High Speaker, whose voice had thundered with proclamations of order, now faltered before the assembled delegates. "The incident," he began, but the word caught in his throat. Incident. As if Ironhold's death had been a bureaucratic mishap, as if thousands of ships had not burned in the sky, as if billions had not watched the galaxy's greatest fleets torn apart by a colony of scavengers and miners. He tried again. The tragedy must be understood as an aberration, but his words were drowned out by whispers. They chose their own extinction to kill us. What kind of species calls that victory? What kind of species survives in death? No law could smother those whispers. No decree could unmake what the galaxy had seen. For the Council's greatest weapon, fear, had turned against it. On the fringe worlds, the whispers became fire. Slaves broke their chains with mining tools, chanting Hale's last words, "Scars are strength." Farmers on conquered planets buried their overseers and raised the scarred flag of Ironhold in rebellion. Even species long cowed by the Council found their voices trembling with defiance, for they had seen a truth impossible to unsee. If the weakest colony of humanity could bring down fleets, then chains were not eternal. The survivors became messengers. Scattered ships that had fled before the blockade, smuggled transports carrying children and elders, even wanderers who had lived among alien allies before the war. They all carried Ironhold's ashes with them. Some bore necklaces filled with dust from the world's surface. Others tattooed their skin with burning canyons, scars inked into scars. Everywhere they went, they told the story. They told of the blockade that starved them. They told of the tunnels that fought back. They told of the pulse cannon that burned a battleship from the sky. And they told of the day their world died to teach the galaxy a lesson. They spoke not in boasts, but in quiet conviction. And those who listened found themselves haunted. For this was not a story of soldiers and generals. It was a story of scars. On a barren mining moon, a child listened to her grandfather tell the tale by the light of a smuggled lamp. They thought hunger would break us, he said, voice cracked like stone. But hunger only reminded us that we had survived worse. The child frowned, but they all died. The old man shook his head. No, little one. The world died. The people live, and the scars live with them. That is what the council never understood. The child touched the scar across her grandfather's hand. A jagged white mark from a mining accident decades past. She traced it gently, as if feeling the memory within it. Then I will carry it too, she whispered. And in that moment Ironhold breathed again. Historians, those who survived the purges and silencing campaigns, would later call it the Scar Doctrine, a shift in galactic law that could not be written on parchment but was etched into every admiral's heart. The doctrine was simple: never corner humanity. Never blockade them, never starve them, never demand their chains. Because humanity did not see those things as threats. They saw them as reminders, as teachers, as sparks to feed their scars. And scars once fed became fire. The council attempted to deny it. They burned records, silenced witnesses, outlawed the retelling of Ironhold's fall. But censorship only fed the myth. The more they tried to erase it, the more powerful it became. Years later, deep in a council academy, a young cadet asked his instructor the question whispered by countless others before him. Why do we not attack the Deathworlds? Why do we not finish humanity while they are still fractured? The instructor, a veteran of the fleets, lifted his sleeve to reveal a scar running the length of his arm, a wound received in the chaos above Ironhold. His mandibles clicked as he remembered the fire, the screams, the sight of a world tearing itself apart to kill him. He lowered his sleeve. His voice was quiet. Because scars do not die, they teach. In time, the council would fracture. Member species drifted away, unwilling to pay the price of enforcement. Fringe empires rose in the cracks, some openly allying with human colonies, others too afraid to cross them. And in the void between, humanity rebuilt. Not with shining capitals or grand fleets, but with whispers, with networks, with scars carried by every refugee who had survived. They did not need banners, they did not need thrones, they had Ironhold. Ironhold was their crown, their flag, their myth. A dead world that spoke louder than any living one. And somewhere in the void, drifting among the shattered remains of the council's pride, a single recorder still carried Governor Hale's last words. You thought our scars made us weak, but scars are memory. Scars are strength. Scars teach. Remember what we have taught you. Those words pulsed endlessly, bouncing off wreckage, echoing through the void. And if you listened long enough, if you pressed your ear to the silence of Ironhold's grave, you could still hear them. Not as a threat, not as a boast, but as a promise.